Here in 2016, we find ourselves 35 years into a TB crisis that is simply growing worse every day. Millions of pounds have been spent on the crisis through various departments. It's time to come together. Time to listen to farmers and work together, valuing experience to tackle the real problem, bacterial infection, TB. A zoonotic disease which spreads to other species, including humans, and is the cause of animal death. There are vets who have been on the ground at farms for the entire 35 years of the crisis who can't talk to scientists. There are farmers living with badgers who are threatened by activists for speaking truths. There are politicians dealing with isolated analysis that has led to poorly judged decisions. This is the story of one farm and an English longhorn herd where Pat Quinn has cultivated a balanced and realistic view of a crisis that has been unresolved in decades.
Mrs. Quinn not only has a beautiful pedigree herd, but she also has what we call a high health herd. Her cattle are accredited free of lots of different cattle diseases. So what we have to do is yearly blood test them, and then she has to keep quite stringent controls on the amount of contact that her cattle have with other cattle. So she has long distance fences between her and her neighbours so that the cattle can't meet nose to nose, and she has very stringent controls about bringing cattle onto her property. Now she doesn't really bring any cows in apart from occasionally a bull, and they're fully tested before they come on board. Now with all the other diseases that we test for regularly, as I say, she is clear of them and we're able to control them by controlling cattle contacts. But with TB, despite the control that she has over her cows meeting other cows, we have a history here now of having TB 5 years ago and then a recent outbreak a couple of months ago. And there's been no new cattle contacts there. So the conclusion has to be that it's come from somewhere else.
With no treatment to cure TB, the testing's only outcome is for animals to be destroyed, badger or cow.
Should definitely be abandoned, whether or not badgers are the cause of the problem, which is, it kind of makes me smile because it's pretty bloody obvious that they're not.
And as Mrs. Quinn has said, she's done some testing in her badger populations and shown that the disease is present there, and therefore the obvious conclusion is that the disease in her herd has come from the badgers.
But even if you thought they were, the evidence is conclusive pretty much that killing badgers doesn't help. It probably makes matters worse.
Now, I test thousands of cattle and have found hundreds of reactors, and it's not always as clear cut as Mrs. Quinn's with a lovely isolated herd as she has, but it's a very common pattern that we see that when cattle are isolated from badgers when they're housed, they don't have disease, and then when they get put out to grass and they're able to contact badgers again, they pick up disease. And so I guess from my perspective it's very frustrating because I trained as a vet to prevent disease and to stop animals getting sick and to keep them alive. And here we have a disease that, despite all the control that we have in the cattle, as I've mentioned with Mrs. Quinn's, we can't control it because we have no ability to control the disease in the wildlife. And that leads to many cows being killed, which is very sad.
You see, the confusing thing is that the badgers are very intermittent with the shedding of this bacteria. So it's not all there all the time.
We've known for years that badgers have been involved in the spread of bovine tuberculosis. But what we've also been aware of throughout this is that not all badgers are actually involved in this disease. As a result, we've always advised our farmers that if you have healthy badgers on your land and you don't have problems with bovine tuberculosis, then those badgers are probably the best friends you've got. They're actually protecting you from the disease by their presence. It's that thinking that's actually made us feel that the approach that we're now seeing from Brian Hill is a way that we feel that things ought to go.
It is important that on cattle farms the behaviour of badgers is understood and a wide area needs to be monitored to track their movements, something many farmers have been doing for decades.
Of course, there has to be science as well, and after so many years of neglect, we now have to try and address the problem of pinpointing the actual bacteria disease, and I think we might be making some progress of that. Unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be a lot of motive to follow this course, I really don't understand why the scientists tend to underrate farmers and vets who have so much practical experience. We really do need to join together much more, and we need to do it in a more practical way, because the government tend to have consultations where you tick boxes to questions that don't necessarily apply. I can even quote from a paper that was written by Wynne Grant, Warwick University, in 2009. The paper was headed "Intractable Policy Failure, the Case of Bovine TB and Badgers." And it's, a piece of it said, large animal vets tended to be sympathetic to their farmer clients and were inclined to see the problem in terms of the badger rather than cattle-to-cattle transmission. The use of veterinary advice is likely to cause further controversy, as their approach to disease control is frequently at odds with other forms of scientific expertise. I do find that quite extraordinary, because we farmers have experience, and just to ignore it is just, well, I think we can prove that we're not getting anywhere.
Over the last 40 years, Pat has raised families of award-winning pedigree English Longhorns.
It was by far the most popular breed in the UK, but by Victorian times it was in steep decline, and a few enthusiasts kept the breed going until it came under the wing of the Rare Breeds Trust in the early 70s.
A lifetime of passionate effort to bring the best in breeding to British farming, battling through obstacles with all the persistence and determination anyone could muster. Pat enjoyed showing successfully for 18 healthy years, but in 1998 she began to notice an increase in badger sets surrounding the farm. Pat wrote to MAF and later DEFRA.
I said that my main concern is that the net around me is tightening, and I understand that I'm now in a triangle of farms closed down. I feel it's only a matter of time when I too will succumb, simply because of the sheer number of badgers. I do realise the merit of not disturbing healthy badgers, but there would seem to be a great risk of letting the population expand too rapidly. And then I was advised to apply for a licence, but in actual fact all we were allowed to do then was to just put up a one-way gate. The idea was that the badger would come out and then not be able to go back, but of course it just dug round, and so it didn't really have any effect at all. We were pretty certain that our badgers were healthy anyway, so we just had to keep our fingers crossed. Well, I'm still writing to everybody I can think of. We take this problem extremely seriously, and we are constantly raising it with the government. It is also discussed in my quarterly meetings with the NFU in Cirencester, to which you would be welcome to attend. I mean, the discussions were endless. I've never known so much a subject so much discussed. More letters from DEFRA, but really offering no solution.
The increase in badgers between 2007 and 2010 coincided with an increase in TB reactors on her farm.
2007, to my absolute horror, my predictions came true, and this was a lovely cow with a calf at foot, had to go, and I was in despair because it had caught up with us. Hilary Benn, I think it was then. I wrote to Hilary Benn. I didn't actually get a reply. At this point, the badgers on the farm, all those little red dots, are all the badger diggings that we had. We were absolutely not able to do anything about at all. The farm originally had 2 historic sets, which were all living quite happily. And of course, in the past, all these extra diggings would have been dealt with.
During this period, Pat was far from alone in having reactors, with farms across the region having to have animals destroyed. So
I even had to contemplate giving up everything, but I decided that this was something that had to be fought. We had to really knuckle down and try to get to the bottom of it. Didn't realise how many more years we'd be struggling with it.
In 2008, a calf had to be shot after its mother was destroyed.
All those went, all that bunch of young heifers with calves at foot, they all went in one go.
She's a 1724. Unfortunately, she's a reactor.
17.
Sorry.
No, she's got a calf.
I see.
So we'll have to...
Maybe the calf will go as well.
We've just got to fight for our industry, because if we don't, it's just going to disappear. Just losing all our beautiful generations of wonderful breeding of cattle. Deafer under fires, TB creeps into new areas. Deadly disease not restricted to cattle. TB levels in pets. Badger cull meetings. TB industry fights back, to no avail really.
During this period, Pat was far from alone in having reactors, with farms across the region having to have animals destroyed.
When you load up your best animals to go to slaughter in the prime of life, how long are we expecting to do this?
He's actually choosing which cow dies first. She was alert. I knew that if she didn't go first, she was going to be absolutely terrified.
I care about the stock that we have on the farm and the wildlife as well. I just want to know that they're clean, and if they're clean, I don't see why my animals should be tested every 6 weeks and nothing happen to the wildlife.
In our area in Devon, it's not have you had TB, it's when did you have it or when you're going to get it. I don't believe the scientists really understand what is going on out in the farm itself. We have been affected with TB on and off since 2001, and we have lost 75 cattle in that period. It's just devastated our herd. It's taken out some of the best bloodlines that we have had.
The last 10 or 15 years that it appears to have run out of control with the number of cattle that are now being killed because of failing the tests.
Pat wrote to politicians locally and nationally, and for the years in which she communicated, the message was always the same.
2011, the disease is spreading slowly because it's silent and it's slow and it's invisible. And obviously, although I'm okay, at the moment I can't relax because I'm sure, we haven't come to the end of this story. So I pursue all my letter writing and doing everything I can.
It is a problem that had the Southwest been given 2 years more back in the early 90s, tuberculosis would have been completely eradicated from this country. Alas, the control of infected badgers was stopped in 1992, and this disease has escalated since then.
We came across a dead badger in a field not very long ago, and it was covered in mange. It was lying on its back. It hadn't been dead for very long, and the very thought of that death for that badger was very disturbing, because I'm sure a lot of it goes on that we don't see.
In 2013, licences were granted for 2 trial areas for farmers to control badgers by shooting, farmers to bear the costs. There was also a costly judicial review brought by the Badger Trust before it got underway. This in no way addressed the problem of the many herds continuously losing cattle outside these areas.
We had the shock of our life when our senior bull, Blackbrook Tudor, reacted.
Blackbrook Tudor was born in March 2009 on a farm away from the high-risk area with a very strict biosecurity routine and no TB breakdowns. His semen was used for embryo transplant and exported to Australia with very strict regulations. He tested clear of BTB and came direct to this farm at the age of 2 in February 2011. He's been tested clear 5 times until April 2016.
Sabine, I'm so glad you've been able to call in because you've been so helpful. When I showed you the results of the veterinary examination after the bull, Tudor, went, we're pretty certain that he couldn't have been passing on the bacteria. Can you explain, having read the report, what your conclusion was about that?
My first idea was, look, he's got very, very small lesions and they are walled off. So, and he wasn't riddled with infection. He remembers they only found lesions in lymph nodes and not all over the body, which is, in my opinion, an indication that the bull has been infected here, because he was here for quite a long time.
Oh, 5 years.
He passed several tests. He passed every test until this date. And if you think about it, these lesions were walled off. So, and I think the next test proved that's right. The other cattle were, knock on wood, all negative. So he didn't pass it on because despite being in close contact with all the other cattle.
Well, all the other cattle were clear.
Yeah.
And of course, we do know that the badgers are only intermittently spreading this bacteria, which makes it difficult. But we do have to be much more specific in how we deal with this disease.
Cultures taken from Tudor after he was slaughtered show the strain of bacteria he was carrying in those early closed lesions was 10A, a strain predominantly found in Gloucestershire. The farm in Leicestershire where he was bred has never had BTB, and the nearest outbreaks appear from the APHA records to be type 17 or 25. These strains of TB speak with regional accents and remain in the patches in which they were first identified 4 decades ago.
So I'm really back at square one, struggling away now to try and make sure something gets done.
The real issue dominating many UK farms and endangering the very existence of farming in this country is TB, and not just a fight over badgers and cows. A vaccine is a beacon of hope, but unrealistic in many ways, as much as media appealing characters such as Brian May might be.
The cull is an enormous red herring and taking attention away from the things which we should be looking at, and in my opinion, number one is vaccinating cattle.
Unfortunately, the BCG vaccine is proving to be a very tricky one for scientists to get right, not only for animals but for humans as well, and it is still needing more work to perfect.
A period of 5 to 10 years is the minimum that we can expect before the process can be finalized and the vaccine is finally available to the farmers and to the authorities. And, it's evident that the situation in England and Wales is not good at all. The situation needs action, and action should be taken now.
I don't understand why they don't want to see TB rid from badgers as well.
I mean, the nonsense of actually just trying to control TB in cattle by ignoring the presence of TB in the badgers makes us a laughing stock abroad.
We're putting down cows with TB, as that has been the conclusion to remove it from the system, so the only logical solution is to do the same with badgers. Test for TB and then humanely put them down too, before they die a painful death underground.
What we campaign for is not some theory that no badger ever gets TB or isn't implicated in the disease. What we do say is let's have a fair deal for the badger. Let's have a proper scientific basis for whatever's going to be done.
Understanding where the source of the infection is coming from is the only way to make a meaningful impression on defeating the disease. This can never be perfect, but because something is difficult, it shouldn't be a reason for indefinite procrastination. To just keep killing cattle is not the answer, nor is wiping out badgers. Pat heard that Warwick University were doing fieldwork on testing the feces of badgers for the bacteria, and she had them come out to take samples on her farm. We know that badgers live in social groups and are very territorial. Some sets are infected and some are healthy. Sabine had the idea that we could test the sets with a method now commonly used in wildlife non-invasive surveillance, hanging a baited rope as shown, and keeping a nightly record on camera.
If you've got the material that carries the pathogen, and that was in the case of badgers oral fluids, why can't they look for a bacterium? So just let's give it a try.
The idea is for the laboratory to extract the oral fluids from the chewed rope, which may contain the TB bacteria.
We did have a go with the ropes, and we've got pictures to prove it.
Yeah.
And we did persuade Warwick University to see if they would get any results, and it was very hopeful. We are hoping that we might be able to progress with this.
I think this is a very valuable tool. Taking samples straight from the badgers without them laying around in a field would be absolutely good.
The lack of cooperation and suspicion of farmers has greatly impeded any progress. We felt, in addition to the badger faeces tests, that the ropes to pinpoint the actual set affected would start to give an area picture of the disease spread. We sent sampled chewed ropes to the Warwick laboratory and had several replies by email. I'm happy to try and extract from the second rope too. I could process them both together next week. I'm still experimenting with the rope. I'm still optimizing the methods. After several tries, on July 4th this year, we received the news. We now have an optimized DNA extraction for the rope, and the latest rope you sent was M. bovis positive. So it does appear that this method could work. We are also looking at expanding into pigs. Let me know when you have more feces and ropes. I was then asked for a substantial donation towards this work, which I paid. I asked how much it would cost me to continue the testing, to which I received no reply. I then sent the preview of this film inviting them to come and discuss a way forward using the tests. The reply I got came as a shock. Pat, I'm extremely busy and it's difficult to find time to watch the film as it is long. However, I have just watched it and I don't feel I can be involved in the film as the tone and message are not in line with my views. Some of what has been said is unscientific, including some of the comments from your vet. Also, you have criticised scientists at least twice in 5 minutes. I am not pro-cull, and I do not believe the evidence supports culling badgers, even in the case of your farm. I do hope you understand that the tone of this video and the content is not in agreement with my views, so I cannot be involved.
This has come as a big disappointment. We went to see if this was the general view. We need to get more government support to try and make this a practical exercise, yes. Because at the moment we've got farms all over the place just losing cattle, and I think there's a lot of suspicion about the overall culling. There's a lot of disagreement, and one cannot work in an atmosphere of people being hostile and nobody understanding what's happening. So it is frightfully important that we all understand exactly what we can do about this. Our discussions did not reach any conclusions. My contact with Warwick University confirmed my fears. There is an enormous cavern between the scientists, who show a remarkable lack of understanding many basic facts, and the farmers who live with their cattle and badgers morning, noon and night, and vets who, if allowed, could contribute to a solution to this dreadful disease.
We have now had to come to the conclusion that the aim of the tests on badger faeces, which has not been officially accepted by DEFRA, is to warn farmers that they have infected badgers and need to avoid them. Farmers are already taking every precaution possible, but as we have to manage the farm, we expect scientists to listen to our protests. We are not able to continue grazing our cattle amongst badgers excreting a deadly bacteria over a wide area. It is not possible or practical for a livestock farmer to have fields where he is not able to turn out animals. Neither are we accepting that infected badgers should be left to die an extremely unpleasant death. It would appear that the purpose of this film, which is to point out the lack of cooperation forthcoming, is fully justified.
This is agony. This is so depressing. This is agony for the farmer, and it's agony for the whole country. It's agony for the animals. My overriding feeling is farmers deserve better.
So this is my story, and I don't see anything changing very much. People keep arguing. We don't seem to make any progress for a future plan. There are many knowledgeable people who could make improvements, but their voices seem to be drowned. I'm hoping that possibly with the new administration we might see some changes.